So for now, this is going to be my final pantheism series video, and I think probably in the future, if the channel does progress and I do feel like it's a good thing to continue with, then my thoughts about pantheism will obviously come out, and the way I incorporate those beliefs into practice and so on will definitely sort of become a feature. But for now, these were kind of the only areas that I thought it might be good to do videos on. And the last one of which is all about environmentalism and the apparent link between pantheism and environmentalism. I'm going to try and keep this as brief as I possibly can, because I do actually have some really intricate thoughts about this which I'm still kind of trying to figure out and work through. So I kind of want to maintain them until a time when I feel like they've really solidified. For now though, I will just say it's very difficult sometimes for me to be both a pantheist and a pagan. If you go on YouTube or you have a look around in pagan forums, you will often come across this very arbitrary question: what makes a pagan? What does it take for you to be a pagan? Or what makes a good pagan? And quite often, 9 times out of 10 really, the responses will include something along the lines of be kind to Mother Earth, show your reverence to nature by helping, by recycling, by actively working in the community to stop pollution, political activism maybe, helping to save trees, signing petitions and things like this. And I can understand that paganism, as an umbrella term, normally tends to encompass what we call nature-based paths. And I do understand that there are some that fall outside of that. And I wouldn't necessarily state that I am on a purely nature-based path per se, because of what the term nature-based path entails and the way that I feel it kind of differentiates between good nature, trees, lakes, forests, greenery, loveliness, and bad nature, which a lot of people don't consider to be nature, but I do. I consider forest fires to be natural. I consider sports cars to be natural. I consider man to be natural. Now, the problem I have with the term paganism as denoting an earth-based path is that I feel that quite often, a lot of the time, it tends to go into this territory where anything that's man-made or anything that threatens the preservation of something else which we much prefer or revere more or think is more beautiful or more worthwhile becomes bad nature, or becomes something unfortunate or something ungodly or something that we need to stop, something that we need to reverse. And it's really, really difficult. It was very difficult for me when I first realised exactly how pantheistic my train of thought was, because I'd just come out of a great many years of viewing myself as pagan, thinking of myself as a complete environmentalist, believing in the preservation of anything green and lovely, and feeling that, you know, factories pumping out smoke and materialism on any level really actually, and fast cars and all this kind of crap was threatening Mother Nature and was not part of nature, and I felt that mankind was a blight on the face of the planet. I'm not saying I was extremely active. I mean, I've been politically extremely active, and not necessarily in an environmentalist sense, but I did feel that we had an ecological obligation. We had an obligation to ecological stewardship over the earth, that we needed to help the earth, look after the earth, preserve the earth, stop, you know, with this crazy pollution and this crazy track we're on of ignoring nature. When I really became truly pantheist and I really started thinking about it and intellectualising it, I realised, and it was quite a harsh realisation, that we are nature too, and that what we do is natural too, and that bad things and ugly things and things that we find difficult to process and things that we find hard to understand are natural too. And I realised that nature, when it's split up into two polarities, good and evil, becomes kind of like a theist religion where there are a set of rules and there are things we need to rid the world of and banish and not address and not look at. And then there are things that we need to raise up and appreciate and admire. And that to me seems incredibly twisted. Now, I have done some work, some journalistic work for the eco-fashion movement, And I was interested in that for a really long time. I wrote online for several publications. I had a few dresses sent to me by eco-designers to review, and I got really heavily into it at one point in my life. I had about a year off work with a really awful old injury, like a snowboarding accident, and I was bored out of my skull, so I started basically doing journalistic pieces and trying to get my name out there, trying to get a portfolio together. And a lot of what I wrote about was about eco-fashion. I also recycle, and I also buy a lot of second-hand clothes. I customise and repair my clothes. I try not to be outlandishly materialistic or unnecessarily materialistic. I complain to my housemates about not turning not turning the lights off when they go to bed. I'm by no means like, you know, not environmentalist. I appreciate the value of moderation, and I don't like waste. I don't like anything unnecessary that causes pain to other life forms for no real reason. I don't like the killings at Dolphin Cove. I don't, you know, there's nothing attractive to me about that. But I would not consider myself an environmentalist because I think that word can be quite dangerous. I think that word entails something else. As a pantheist, in my opinion, it's not necessarily synonymous with environmentalism, and I think it's really important that people understand this, because environmentalists are really getting hold of this term now, pantheist, and they're applying it to themselves in droves. But what they don't understand is that a lot of the time the way they talk is as though man is divorced from nature, and that we have a responsibility towards nature. Yes, pantheism does consider nature to be God, but pan, theos, everything is God. Why are we drawing a line between what's natural and what needs to be protected and maintained and appreciated, and what's bad? And why are we always what's bad? We're natural too. You know, as ugly and unsightly and filthy and horrendous as we are, with the wars we start and the things we say to each other and the terribly messy and disgusting way we deal with the problem of our own consciousness, which tends to eat us alive half the time and confuse the hell out of us the other half, we are part of nature too. And I think it's difficult when you're a pagan to talk about things like this, and it is really difficult because a lot of pagans will be like, well, if you're not actively trying to save the trees and save the earth, and you know, then what are you doing? What do you do? But pantheism isn't really about doing. It's a standpoint that you reach under the weight of your own rationality and belief. It's a standpoint that you reach when you feel it's what's true in your heart. And then unfortunately you're faced with this very ethical dilemma where you think, I don't know if environmentalism, strictly as it's spoken about by activists, is pantheistic. I think it's actually a little bit of a good and evil kind of idea, where we've got things that need to be banished and things that need to be protected. The other thing I think is scary about the link between environmentalism and pantheism, and this is a thing that I'm still thinking through, so it may come out a little bit funny. Pantheism really rejects the idea of anthropocentrism, or the idea that we are the most important race, that we are the species that that matters. And you know, this anthropocentrism or biocentrism, whatever you want to call it, is something that pantheists completely reject, because they see a unity in all things and they don't see any particular life form as being more or less important or invested with power as any other. And they also believe, obviously, in the importance of synergy and biodiversity, the idea that one thing couldn't exist without any other thing. But then on the other hand, you have this huge environmentalist vibe where people are talking about how we need to maintain the earth for future generations, and we need to make sure that the earth is okay for the future of our race, and we need to maintain our race. We're going to end up dying if we don't do this and that and the other. That to me is anthropocentric, isn't it? I mean, intellectually, it is. It's like stating that we need to address our ecological stewardship and responsibility towards Mother Earth, because otherwise we won't be able to carry on for X many more generations. Now, I don't see what's so important about us. I think we're no more or less important than any other species, and I think that if we do die out, it will be a return to normality in many ways. If you look at the span of time that we've been able to establish that Earth's been around for, we're the blink of an eye. we are the blink of an eye, and I realise that we feel very self-important, and because we've been blessed with this incredible gift of consciousness, we are in fact the all experiencing and interpreting itself for the first time that we're aware of, you know. I mean, of course animals are sentient and they feel pain and they have free will, but consciousness is a whole new ball game. So of course we feel very important, and we feel very afraid of death and of the idea of extinction, and we feel that this is all that there is and all there need ever be, and that human beings are the central core of everything. But in fact we are a blip. We're a blip, and I'm not actually certain that we should feel quite the amount of guilt we do, because I think it's that guilt that divorces us from nature. If we are not naturally a giving and nurturing and understanding species that appreciates that it should take care of what it's got because what it's got is beautiful and should be revered, then that we're naturally just not that kind of species and will suffer for it. But I think removing ourselves from the idea that we ourselves are natural is, in a sense, what environmentalism does. As I said, I have written for environmentalist publications, and I do appreciate massively eco-fashion. I've read a few books that describe horribly the human price that we pay and the price animals pay for fashion, the ridiculous, quick, like fast fashion of the high street that is basically fed on human blood. I'm not even being funny about that. In many different ways it's killing off parts of our society, and we're treating them as subhuman so we can have sandblasted jeans, stuff like that. I totally get that, and I don't appreciate the human toll or the toll of life that entails. I think that it's not necessary and it can be done another way. So I'm not saying that I'm driving around in a 4x4 pumping out exhaust and loving it and telling environmentalists that they're ridiculous for wanting to save a 200-year-old tree. But on the other hand, I am saying that environmentalism can lead into things like anthropocentrism, or like the idea that we have this responsibility to nature, as though nature is this thing that is other to us, or as though nature is this thing that only involves lakes and stars and beautiful creatures. Definitely doesn't. I'm a true pantheist, pantheos, everything God. If it's going on, it's part of the all. And no matter how scared I am of it, no matter how much I want to dissociate myself from it, I can't do that. Because that's not the nature of the beast, that's not the nature of pantheism, that's not what it actually professes to represent. So I think there is a funny relationship going on at the moment between environmentalism and pantheism. There's a struggle going on. And as I said, I like moderation, I like balance. I understand that waste makes us feel drained and void on a spiritual level, as well as it being pathetic and irresponsible, and come on, we can do better than that. And I can appreciate that side of environmentalism. You know, 2 enthusiastic thumbs up, no problem with that. But I have a problem with the side that ties environmentalism in with pantheism, because environmentalists generally have a very, very clear idea of what's bad and what's good, what needs to be gotten rid of and what needs to be preserved. And that, to me, is a theist idea. The all is the all, you know, and if you can't love and revere everything it encompasses, then you're going to have difficulty being a pantheist, but you may, yes, very well be an environmentalist, but the two are not synonymous. And if anyone has any thoughts on this and has managed to get this far, I would bloody love to know what your thoughts are, even if you think I am so wrong that I need to just put myself back in a cage and shut up. Because I find this a very difficult subject and a really difficult thing to talk about, and really confusing for myself too, personally. So much so that I wasn't even going to make a video about this part at first, because I thought, no, I can't address the environmentalism thing. I can't do it because I'm still so unclear in myself. But I've done it, so, you know, if anybody is sort of feeling a bit like they fancy shooting the shit and intellectualising, then make yourself a cup of tea and inbox me, and please tell me what your thoughts are, because it is something that continues to baffle and astound and interest and fascinate me.